As your applications start to get larger and as you start to use more libraries and as more people start using your application, you're going to need more information about what's going on inside of your code. And so fortunately for us, Java has a standard de facto logging library that's really easy to implement as long as you know a little bit about the background of what's going on. So essentially what we use Log4j, that's the name of it. What we use Log4j for is to not only find out what's happening in our code, but also find out what's happening in the code of our libraries. Sometimes Java can be an opaque black box in the fact that we don't get a lot of feedback about what's going on. But we can, by using Log4j, we can tap into the logs of our libraries that we're using. We can kind of get an insight into what's happening. So let me revert this file back to using JDBC. We can use local history, and I want to revert it to 158 today. Great. Now, oftentimes when we get exceptions, we throw a runtime exception, and that halts our program. That stops everything, and that says there is a problem that occurred, and that's good. It lets the user know. But what if we're working on like a web server and they get an exception, it gets propagated back to them, maybe they get 500, or maybe we wrap it in a nice pretty message like an error occurred, please try again. But we're going to want to know about that problem on our side. So what we can do is we can define a log4j logger, and it's really simple. We just say log, and this is a variable that we create. We specify the error level and a message, and most importantly, you want to specify the actual stack trace. Not the stack trace, you want to specify the exception. That way the stack trace is included in your log file itself. And right up here we can see here we've got log defined. We define a logger for each class that we use, or each class that we want to define logging on. And it's just going to take one argument that's a string, and that's pretty much just the name of the class. So whenever so that whenever it prints out the log, it can tell you where it's coming from. So that's a bit about how we use Log4j in our own application. How do we use Log4j to look at the logs of our libraries? So what we do is we create a log4j.properties, and this will sit in the resources folder if you're using a Maven project, and it can just sit right at the root. And what this file is going to look like is there's going to be two things in this file. There's going to be loggers and appenders. Now what loggers do is they take the logging level and where it's going to go. So hey, I want to log everything from com.mikemany.launchcode, which is my application. I want to say anything that's info or higher severity. So Log4j has a hierarchy of severities. It goes info, warn, error, there's a whole bunch of them, but essentially debug. So this is going to include all debug statements, I believe. It's going to include all error statements. It's going to include just about everything. And what we're going to do is we're going to send it to a file, and we're going to send it to a standard out. And these are both appenders that we've defined. And we can define multiple of these logs using different appenders for each one. So for example, here is the Hibernate logger. So we can say, hey, I want to log everything from the package org.hibernate, which is all of my Hibernate libraries. I want to log everything about those logs. I want to send it to the HBM appender. And also, log4j additivity equals false. This is a little innuendo in the log4j file that says only send this stuff right here. Log4j has an idea about hierarchies in which we can send all of our logs to a single file, and that is the default. And in some cases you don't really want that, because we'd be sending all of our very detailed Hibernate logs into the root logger, which is going to go to a file that we've created. So that's how loggers work. Let's look at the appenders. Now you can see the appenders here. We've got an example one up here. We've got another down here, and here's where we log to the console. We've got a target, and that's just system.out. We give a class for a layout, and then we can give, if you look up not the annotations, but the percent signs, percent symbols, you can specify, hey, I want the date, and I want the message and various other things to be included in this format, and that's about what it does. You also see I've got a rolling appender and a console appender. A rolling appender is going to, after the log file gets to a certain size, it's going to go ahead and make a new log file for you and back up the old one. This one's just going to log straight to the console. What else can we talk about? Oh, we can specify the file that logs to. So this metrolink.log is going to go right here, and we can, there may or may not be some stuff in metrolink.log at the moment. Okay, good. You can see right now Spring's logging all of their information to this log as well. So I probably want to create a separate Spring logger and give it its own appender. So we can specify the file. We can specify whether it should overwrite or just append to the end. Let me show you one other thing. We also can take a look at the HBM.log, and we can see Hibernate gives us quite detailed information about everything that's happening, including, most importantly, it gives you information about unable to find certain things. So it's not able to find this class, or maybe it's not able to find the database, or maybe it's not able to find its configuration files. This is where it's going to let you know about that type of stuff. And that's about it for Log4j. There's some awesome tutorials and more information on Log4j on tutorialpoint.com. Just give it a good Google search and you'll be able to find something great.